Hey, AP students, welcome. This is my down and dirty introduction to the DBQ essay. I've fallen ill here and I have to step out for today. I can tell you the story later. It's not COVID, doesn't appear to be COVID, so hopefully I'll be back real soon. But at any rate, this is an introduction to how to do a DBQ. And I'm going to walk you through the first one that we're going to attempt. It's a very serious and very important skill, but it's also something that uses a lot of the skills you guys have already built up in our class. So I feel excited to walk with you guys into this. You guys are good writers, right? You're good writers. You're going to be good DBQ writers once you get the hang of it. So what's a DBQ? It's called a document-based question. And it's in this question, you're going to be given 7 documents. And a document is like normally a piece of text. It's about a paragraph. You're given 7 documents and a prompt, and you're asked to answer the prompt using those 7 documents. It's a lot like writing a research paper if the College Board was nice enough to compile the research for you and hand you the research, right? And so it takes a while to do. On the national exam, you'll get an hour to do it. But you're not writing for an hour. You're probably reading and planning for 15 or 20 minutes and then writing for 40 or 45 minutes. It looks a lot like an LEQ when it's all said and done. It's like a 4 or 5 paragraph thing like an LEQ. It uses some of the very same skills, but there's some additional work and some key pieces we got to talk about a little bit. So let's just jump right in. The big thing about a DBQ is it's all about reading. It's all about reading. It's less about your knowledge of that particular topic. In fact, the funny thing is you can probably get a pretty solid score in a DBQ, even if you don't know that much at all about that particular topic going in. So the scores are out of 7 instead of 6 like an LEQ. And if you can get a 4 is like an A- in the course. So you can get a lot of those points just by reading carefully. The other part, and this is good news, bad news. How do you study for a DBQ? You don't really study for it. Doing practice DBQs helps you a lot, but the night before a DBQ, what are you supposed to do to get ready? Just, I don't know, get better at reading, pray, get a good night's sleep. All that stuff is really, get yourself centered, I'd say. But it's not like you walk in having a bunch of research, right? It's not like when you have 6 LEQ prompts and you got to build all those outlines. It's not like that at all. So yeah, you'll sit down, you read the prompt carefully, then you read the 7 documents. Now, normally all the documents or almost all the documents will be a bit of text, about a paragraph. And then you might have one that's a photograph or a chart or something like that. And as you're reading each one or looking through each one, you'll ask yourself, okay, so what does this document have to say about the prompt, right? How does this document relate to the prompt? You don't want to have to keep rereading those documents. So let's say the prompt says, this is from a real one a few years back, evaluate the extent to which the Portuguese transformed trade in the Indian Ocean trade region in the period after 1450. Okay, and so that's your prompt, and you're thinking, okay, well, what do I know about that? Maybe remember Vasco da Gama and Portuguese trade posts, or maybe you don't, I don't know. And you start reading, and the first thing you read is, okay, this is an Ottoman merchant who's frustrated that the Portuguese are poaching in on his profits and trade margins or something like that. So you write down in the notes what's going on. Here's what this document's about, so that you don't have to go back and reread them all later. You're making your little notes to yourself, and you're asking yourself, how is this responding to the prompt, right? So you're saying the Ottomans got frustrated that the Portuguese were taking their stuff or something like this. Or how is this document similar to other documents? We'll talk more about that in just a second. Well, let's talk about it right now. As you're reading through your 7 documents, what you're going to do is you're going to put these documents into 2 or 3 groups. And these 2 or 3 groups are going to be sort of different ways that you are responding to the prompt. They're basically the different body paragraphs of your argument. Like if you're doing the one about to what extent did the Portuguese transform maritime trade, maybe you're coming up with, here's 2 changes that I came up with, and then 1 continuity. So I'm going to have 3 groups. 2 of those groups are about two changes that were going on, and one of the groupings is about the one continuity, right? So as you're reading the documents, you're kind of asking yourself not only how does this document answer the prompt, you're thinking, how does this document relate to the other documents? Do I read it and go, oh, that's like this other one, right? Or, oh, this is a very different perspective from that. Or, oh, I just spotted a difference or a similarity, right? Or here's another way to answer the prompt. And you're kind of putting them together in your groups. There's not just one way to group documents. And a grouping can be just one document. Maybe you find one exception to the rule. That's good. That's for complexity. So maybe you put that in there. You do need to use all the documents, all right? But you don't necessarily, when you start off, you don't know what your argument's going to be. You have to follow the documents. That's one of the things. What you don't want to do, ladies and gentlemen, is read the prompt and say, oh, I know exactly how the Portuguese transformed maritime trade, blah, 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 blah. Because you need to kind of follow the evidence. You need to follow where the documents are taking you. So that's a skill of like reading carefully. How are these answering the prompt? And how can I group these together in 2 or 3 different ways? You're going to write a thesis statement. I don't want to belabor this point because it's the same thing as writing an LEQ thesis, right? So if they're asking for changes or continuities, then give 2 of one and 1 of the other, right? If they ask for to the extent that things are similar, anytime it says to what extent, say to a great extent or to no extent or somewhere in between. Your thesis needs to be clear and specific, and it needs to be accurate. Again, all the stuff that we're very used to, right? Your thesis I should be able to read your thesis and know exactly what your 2 or 3 body paragraphs are going to say. So as you think about this so far, ask yourself, what's overwhelming? What's similar so far? What seems different or strange or tricky so far? I'll say doing a DBQ certainly requires you in real time to be kind of razor sharp. Like you got to be thinking clearly. You have to be analyzing. Sometimes you might start to panic a little bit, just because that's what we do when things are hard sometimes. And you have to be able to get yourself to calm down and just say, how am I going to answer this prompt? What is this document saying? How does that help me answer the prompt? How could I partner this document with another 1 or 2 to kind of put them together and make part of my argument? Of the 7 points, now you can start looking through all the materials you've got, and there's a rubric there. There's the official rubric, and there's also on your Black Death DBQ, there's the practice rubric. But when you look at those 7 points, 3 of them are for evidence. The first one is a basic evidence point. I bet all of you will get it probably just about every DBQ we do this year, which is, did you accurately describe the content from at least 3 of the documents? Did you say document 2 is an Ottoman merchant complaining to the Ottoman Sultan that the Portuguese were unfair to him and now he's losing profits, right? You just described what's going on there. I want to be clear. You don't get any points for quoting a document. Don't quote a document. Don't ever quote a document. If you're including a quote from a document, you are wasting your time and the readers. There is no way to get any points by quoting a document. Just paraphrase it. Just describe it. That is showing your reader, I understand what's happening in this document. So the first evidence point is, can you do that for 3 of the 7 documents? Easy for you guys. Second one, it's harder. Can you accurately describe what's going on in 6 of the 7 documents? Harder. You'll still get it frequently, but it's harder to get. All right, that's all right. And the last point, can you give 1 additional piece of specific evidence that can help support your thesis that doesn't come from any of the documents? It comes from up here, your brain. Where are you with that, ladies and gentlemen? So this one's harder than it sounds, all right? And this is an advanced evidence point. So there's 1 basic evidence point and 2 advanced ones. The 2 advanced ones are for using 6 out of the 7. They give you 1 mulligan, where if you miss 1 document, well, it's not the end of the world. And then the last one is, can you give an additional piece of supporting evidence, something from outside the documents that supports what you're saying? It's hard, but good. It definitely shows that you know what you're talking about. The hardest part of the DBQ, and probably the single trickiest and most collegiate level skill in this entire course, is sourcing the DBQ documents. What you're doing when you are sourcing is you're not just describing what's happening in that document, you're explaining exactly what's going on with that document. You're explaining how the author's point of view or the intended audience, like who they were writing this to, or what their purpose was in writing it, or maybe their historical situation, how that shapes what the author is saying. It's like you have to put yourself in the room with the person who's writing the document. You're saying, look, this is a Ottoman merchant, right? He's used to being dominant in the region. And so the Portuguese coming in is frustrating for him because he's losing money. And when he refers to the Portuguese as infidels, that's because he's talking to an Ottoman sultan who is also a Muslim, and he's trying to appeal to him as a fellow Muslim, right? It's a complex skill. It shows that you really understand. You're seeing between the lines of the document, right? So there's different ways of doing it. What is this author's intentions or motivation? Who's their intended audience, and how is that shaping what they're saying? Or what's the circumstance surrounding them, right? Like, this person is writing during the Renaissance. And so what you are seeing here is a great example of Renaissance humanism or Renaissance curiosity or something like that, right? I want you guys to try this for 5 out of the 7 documents, and you need to hit it on 3 of them. So correctly, accurately source 3 of the DBQ docs. That is a challenging level skill, all right? Again, reading a document is, what is this text saying? Sourcing a document is, why is this person saying this? Why is this person saying it in that way? What will help illuminate or explain what's going on here? Consider quietly, how do I feel about this, right? How challenging might this be? I'll show you an example of it in a moment, but one thing I am going to give you guys as my belated Christmas gift to all of you is this sourcing cheat sheet. Every DBQ that you write for me, a practice one, an extra credit one, or on an exam, I'm going to provide you with this sourcing cheat sheet. These are sentence stems that help you sort of find that sourcing sweet spot of, you're not just describing what a document says, but you're explaining what's going on between the lines of the document. You won't have this in the national exam, but it's my hope that by May 12th, you will have done this enough. You've done it frequently enough where you've internalized the ideas here, right? So read through these, see what these have to say. And sometimes as you go through a document and you want to try and source that document, you might want to look through this sourcing cheat sheet and see if any of these sparks an idea or sparks an avenue of analysis that you could implement. I believe you could do this. And by the way, no shame, zero shame in using these. If on this practice DBQ, I see that you've used 5 of these or you've used them repeatedly throughout the semester, I'm going to give you a high five for that. That just means you are really earnestly trying the sourcing skill. So use this as much as you need to, gang. In the end, a DBQ looks like an LEQ. The first paragraph has your contextualization and your thesis. Great. Paragraphs 2 through 4 are the different parts of your argument, your body paragraphs that have your argument in them. And then in the end, you restate the thesis and you put it in different words if you have time to do that, right? So on the outside, it looks just like an LEQ. We'll look at an example paragraph in a little bit. So let's look. You can look over the DBQ rubric, but let me walk you through. If you want to pause the video now to do this, that's fine. But what I want to do is walk you through the practice essay I'm going to have you do. And I'll tell you, I grabbed this DBQ out of what I would consider to be the easy bucket. It's not designed to be a killer. It's designed to be very straightforward for us. So the first thing we do when you open up that DBQ essay after you look through the rubric, it says, practice DBQ prompt. Evaluate the extent to which societies responded to the Black Death similarly in the 14th century. To what extent did different societies respond to the Black Death similarly in the 14th century? So if you're looking at that, you say, well, what do I know about this topic? We talked about it a lot with regard to Europe, less with regard to like the Muslim world or China. Ideas for contextualization. What would be a historical process or historical event that led to the Black Death? Can you think of anything right now? I mean, if it would, it's the same skill as an LEQ. So can you already put 1 point in the bucket and do some context? Okay, so that's our prompt. Evaluate the extent to which societies responded to the Black Death similarly in the 14th century. Let's go through our documents in this DBQ one by one. Document 1. Gabriel de Mussis, sorry guy, a historian from Italy in his History of the Plague, 1348. This historian from Italy wrote, I am overwhelmed. I can't go on. Everywhere one turns, there is death and bitterness to be described. The hand of the Almighty strikes repeatedly to greater and greater effect. The terrible judgment gains power as time goes by. What shall we do? Kind Jesus, receive the souls of the dead. Avert your gaze from our sins and blot out our iniquities. We know that whatever we suffer is the just reward of our sins. Now, therefore, when the Lord is enraged, embrace acts of penance so that you do not stray from the right path and perish. All right. What are we seeing here about how societies responded to the Black Death? How would we characterize this response to the Black Death? How about sourcing? Why would this person from Italy in 1348 respond to the Black Death in this way? What about his context or point of view or historical situation would illuminate or explain the sort of response that we're seeing here? Okay, moving ahead to document 2. You can pause this video whenever you need to write down more notes. I'm just going to keep going. Document 2, Giovanni Boccaccio, the Decameron, written in Florence, Italy around 1350. So same country, about the same time. This man says, now a general procedure was followed more out of fear of contagion than because of charity toward the dead. Alone, or with the help of whatever porters they could find, they dragged the corpses from their houses and piled them in front, so, particularly in the morning, anyone abroad could see countless bodies. Biers, or platforms for the dead, were sent for, and when they were lacking, ordinary planks carried the bodies. More than one bier carried 2 or 3 together. Countless times it happened that 2 priests going forth with a crowd to bury someone were joined by 3 or 4 biers carried behind them by bearers, so that while priests thought they had 1 corpse to bury, they found themselves with 6, 8, or even more. Nor were these dead honored with tears, candles, or mourners. It had come to such a pass that men who died were shown no more concern than dead goats today. A bleak message. What are we seeing about how societies responded to the Black Death during that period of time? What are we seeing in terms of a response? Is this response, would you put this response that we're seeing here in the same category as document 1, in the same group? Does this seem like a different sort of response? Or maybe do you not have enough information yet? Do you need to see the other documents first? Is there some way that we could explain what's going on here? Explain and say, here's the historical situation and that's why this is going on, or why this author is reporting that? Any guesses? Remember, you can't source every document. I think the document 1 is easier to source than document 2. All right, moving on. A photograph, or a painting. It says Flagellants at Doornik in Holland, 1349. So do we know anything that's going on here? Can we explain this? What sort of response does this seem like to the Black Death? Is this response of a similar sort to what we saw in document 1 or document 2 or both? Okay. Document 4, William Dean, historian from Rochester, England, circa 1350. Pardon me. The people, for the greater part, became ever more depraved, more prone to every vice, and more inclined than before to evil and wickedness, not thinking of death, nor of the past plague, nor of their own salvation. Priests, little weighing the sacrifice of a contrite spirit, betook themselves to where they could get larger stipend in their own benefices. That's their own office, their own job. and stipend is pay. So they took themselves where they could get larger stipends than in their own benefices, on which account many benefices remained unserved. Day by day, the dangers to souls, both in clergy and people, multiplied. The laborers and skilled workmen were imbued with such a spirit of rebellion that neither king, nor law, nor justice could curb them. All right. So what are we seeing about how people in England are responding to, society in England is responding to the Black Death? Is this similar to or different from, in any way, some of the other documents we've heard before? Are we seeing multiple different responses to the Black Death, or is it all just one similarity after the next? Why would this be happening? Why would priests be doing this, right? Or what's the historical situation? How can we explain what's going on in this document? Document 5, Ibn Batuta. An old friend. So our old friend Ibn Batuta, a Muslim traveler who encountered the plague in Syria and North Africa during his travels in the 14th century, from his travels in Asia and Africa. He writes, as a result of the plague, the people fasted for 3 successive days. Afterward, they assembled in the great mosque until it was filled to overflowing, and spent the night there in prayers. Then, after performing the dawn prayer, they all went out together, carrying Qurans in their hands. The entire population of the city of Damascus joined. The Jews went out with their book of the law, and the Christians with the gospel, all of them in tears, imploring the favor of God through his books and his prophets. Does this sound similar to what we've heard from other societies? Is it sounding different? Why would Ibn Batuta be writing about this? Why would this be his focus? What about his point of view would cause him to do this? This is where, if you see a source and it's someone you know, then you're in great shape for sourcing analysis. And in our case, I think you should be well equipped to explain why Ibn Batuta is commenting on the particular things that he was. Document 6 is a chart. Note to self, or note to you, don't source charts. You can't. It's hard to read between the lines of a chart. You can just explain what's going on. So when we look at this chart, it says, this chart shows wages for Egyptian and Syrian workers during the time of the plague. Wages for tasks both related and unrelated to the plague. So a laborer can earn a daily wage of 1.5 dirhams plus 3 loaves of bread. And it notes at the bottom, the dirham was a common coin currency in many Arab nations in the 12th through 14th centuries. A horse groomer could earn 4 dirhams a day. A Black Death body carrier could earn 6 dirhams a day. And the reader of a Quran funeral prayer during Black Death could earn 10 dirhams a day. What is this saying about the response to the Black Death? What other documents does this seem to be similar to? In what way? How could we explain what's going on? And by the way, with all this talk of money, is that reminding us of any other responses or results of the Black Death that we've learned about anywhere else that we could use as outside evidence? Can we think of anything? Can you turn to friends and think of anything? Finally, Document 7, Ibn al-Wardi, a Muslim historian, an essay on the report of the pestilence from 1348. O God, it is acting by your command. Lift this from us. It happens where you wish. Keep the plague from us. Who will defend us against this horror other than you, the Almighty? Oh, if you could see the nobles of Aleppo studying their inscrutable books of medicine. They multiply the remedies by eating dried and sour foods. The buboes which disturb men's healthy lives are smeared with Armenian clay. They perfume their homes with ambergris and camphor, cypress and sandal. They wore ruby rings and put onions, vinegar, and sardines together with the daily meal. They ate less broth and fruit, but ate citron and similar things. We ask God's forgiveness on our soul's bad inclination. The plague is surely part of his punishment. We take refuge from his wrath in his pleasure and from his chastisement in his restoring. So, what sort of response are we seeing to the Black Death here? Is this similar to or different from other ones? Why is this Muslim historian taking the particular approach or attitude that he is toward the medical men? What do you think? So you put these together, and then what you're doing next, I'll talk about this in a second, but what you do next is you sort of make your notes. What are the three parts of my argument going to be? And what are my groupings going to be? Right? You sort of sit down. I want to encourage you to work with each other on that. Okay? And if you want to write emails, I should be still accessible via email. What are your groupings? How are you going to put this all together? A body paragraph in the end could look something like this. So this is something I've written. Let me read through this and talk about what's going on. So all body paragraphs start off with a topic sentence that goes back to the prompt, as you know. It says, European Christians and Muslims in the Middle East both reacted to the Black Death in the early 14th century with strongly religious responses, although not always in ways approved of by religious leaders. Ibn Batuta reports approvingly how Muslims in Syria fasted for days in a prayerful response to the plague and joined with Christians and Jews in a religious procession, Doc 5. Please note, I want you to always cite a document after you describe it. Now you can do that one of two ways. Like I do here, it says Doc 5 in parentheses at the end of the citation or description. That's good. You can also say in document 5, blah, 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 blah. And I do that later on. But I always want you to point out to the reader, I'm describing a document right now. So what I've done here where it says Ibn Batuta reports approvingly how ... that's just me describing what that document said for evidence. Now sourcing. It's unsurprising that Batuta would focus and report favorably on this, as he was a Muslim cleric who traveled across the Muslim world and wrote about Islamic religious practices. Document 3 shows another religious procession. Flagellants in Holland, preemptively punishing themselves for their sins in hopes that God will spare them. So that's me describing it to get the evidence point. Then what I'm doing next is I'm unpacking and explaining what's going on, partly to see if I can get the sourcing, but also to aim for that complexity point where it's I can give you qualifiers and nuance here. Though they carry a cross in their procession, these events were not approved of by the Catholic Church. They were instead an expression of popular religion in a moment of desperation. Across the world, people responded to the Black Death with religious demonstrations, although not always in ways approved of by religious authorities. All right, guys. What I want you to do is try to write out a response. All right? Using the outline I gave you. This is graded with a practice rubric, and I'm going to use it. I'm going to grade you pillow soft on it. I just want you to try, and then we'll see how we do. I'm honestly sad that I can't be there with you. You're going to do great, though. You are really good writers. There's a pillow soft rubric. We're going to give this a shot and help each other. Please, ladies and gentlemen, help each other in this work. Good luck. Email me if a big question pops up, and I will otherwise see all of you on Monday. Thanks, gang.